In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
To another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 75. Now is the winter of our discontent. I am Andrew Langer.
I think I'm Jerry Rogers, but I have no idea where I am.
Well, that's, we're trying something new. For those of you who are listening, I'm trying this immersive background feature on the program we use to record. We may experiment with this just a little bit, but to make it look like Jerry and I are in the same room. In fact, Jerry, I'm going to turn and look at you. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you.
All right.
Hey, actually, high five. Hey, there we go. Virtual high five there. So episode 75. Happy New Year, everybody. We're so glad you can join. By the way, Jerry, we hit another milestone in terms of our downloads. So we're very excited for that. We appreciate it. Listen, I'll take this opportunity to say in the new year, as we move forward, if you are listening or watching Andrew and Jerry Save the World, please subscribe. Please leave us a like, leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you are consuming the show on. And most importantly, spread it by social media. Let your friends know. Let your family members know. Let your family members' friends know. Let your friends' family members know all about Andrew and Jerry Save the World. So, it's funny, Jerry. I was talking to one of our huge fans yesterday who was starting to get angry that we hadn't done a show. But it's been a busy New Year for both of us, isn't it?
It has been, and there's been snow and weather and climate change. Apparently, if it snows, it's climate change.
Right.
If it doesn't snow, it's climate change. January 2nd, New York Times headline.
Yes.
Snow is gone forever.
Right.
Climate change.
God will not be mocked. God will not be mocked, Jerry.
10 days later, January 12th, New York Times, same paper of record, the Gray Lady says climate change will cause more snow.
Right.
So it's say anything science. And you know what? I was curating this morning, articles and links for Real Clear, and it's amazing how, because of the weather, the snow in Maryland, in Tennessee, right. And we're seeing lots of cold weather in January, surprise. So it's amazing how the left really does respond together in unison. There are all these pieces this morning that I read on how climate change will cause cold weather.
Right.
But it also will cause warm weather.
Right.
It will also cause rain or not. The point is that we are just so messed up, and we're not dealing with science when it comes to climate change.
Here's the reality, right, Jerry? The climate changes for all kinds of factors.
Wasn't there an ice age once?
Well, yes, that's it.
Oh my! And was
there one ice age? There have been several ice ages.
Right, and wasn't the Sahara Desert once a rainforest?
Well, listen, there's an old joke that's inherent to that. A little guy shows up at a lumber camp. He wants to be a lumberjack. and the foreman looks at him and says, well, where have you worked? And he says, I've been here, I've been there. My most recent work was in the Sahara forest. And the lumberjack, the foreman says, don't you mean the Sahara Desert? And the little man says, well, it is now.
Yeah, but I
know it's a terrible joke.
But yes, the Earth goes through cooling and warming. It goes through hot periods, warming periods. It goes through cooling periods. And here's the thing, right? All science says to us now, all the journals and the peripheral and secondary journals are telling us that 2023 was the hottest year on record. There were more extreme weather events in history, but however, it's not true. First of all,
right.
I know this isn't the topic of the show, but let me just get this out. And then we can go on.
Please go ahead, Jared.
But first of all, when they say 2023 is the hottest year on record, what they mean is that that the average temperature in 2023 is the hottest they've ever recorded. And however, it's the average temperature. So they go to certain points around the globe to collect data. But however, we know that in the US, for instance, we actually 2023 saw a cooling.
Well,
so
this gets into Newton's law of thermodynamics, which is when you have a body that heats at one end, you're going to have cooling at the other. I mean, this is
But to take the average, and say this is the hottest year is really using stats to deflect on the issue.
Well, it's also, I mean, obviously it also gets so much more. Bjorn Lomborg had a really good piece up yesterday about this and about the economics of global warming. So not climate change. Let's assume for a moment that climate change means warming, and it means global mean average temperature. I guess global mean temperatures and average temperatures same thing. But if the global mean temperature goes up by, I think he said 1.5 degrees, economically, it means that because part of this is it's going to make the poor poorer, it's going to do all of these things. Really, what it means for global GDP is a loss of about 0.75%. And then, of course, the next question is, and I don't think he answered this in this piece, which is all of the economic engineering that the left wants to go through to ameliorate that 1 degree centigrade or 1.5 degrees centigrade in terms of climate change will destroy global economies. It's interesting, actually, Jerry, this is a perfect segue into this major issue. You and I have talked about this. Folks have heard me say ad nauseum my line that the most well-intentioned policies eventually bump up against very real realities. Talking about these cold weather events, what have we learned about electric vehicles, Jerry? We learned that they don't work very well in cold weather.
No, they don't.
And sorry, go ahead.
And there's a geopolitical issue layered on top of this. So you're right. The EV battery has half the lifespan in cold weather. We know that there's problems with charging stations, etc. However, we also know that if you don't own a car made in China or its battery made in China today, you will very soon.
Yes.
Because our economic policy, trade policy, our climate change policy is with these EV mandates, electric vehicle mandates, and these subsidies and these government interference in the market is only empowering China. Right. China owns the electric vehicle market. It owns the EV battery market.
It's funny. Two things on this point, Jerry. Number one, I had a conversation yesterday with a county commissioner from a county in Colorado where they have on their public lands a lot of these rare earth minerals that cannot be mined in the United States because of mandates by the Biden administration.
Right.
At the same time, I turned around and had a conversation. I was over at CEI last night. By the way, congratulations to our friend and colleague, Richard Morrison, for the 1-year anniversary of his podcast, Free the Economy. Was having a conversation with one of their scholars yesterday on environmental issues, and they're tracking a situation, Jerry, when they do mining in China. Now, I'm sure you know this, I'll explain it to people. When you mine, there are all kinds of waste materials that are produced by these mines, and they're usually put into tailing pits and retention ponds. So ponds that are filled with water to sort of keep the waste down and not so that it doesn't go into the air. And you have runoff from the processes of refining the raw material into these minerals. Well, apparently, Jerry, none of these or many of these retention ponds are not lined properly. And so the wastewater that is filled with the waste byproducts of nickel and cadmium and lead and other things that are used to make batteries for electric vehicles, it's all leaching and potentially leaching into the Yellow River. And that is the water source for about 350 million people who will be poisoned by this because China doesn't care about environmental regulations. They just care about dominating marketplaces.
Wait a minute. I thought we just had COP28. I've been told by the global elites that China's on board with environmentalism and conservation and climate change. Andrew, are you saying that the Chinese might have told an untruth?
Well, it's right, Jerry. It's one of those things where there are half truths that are at work. China may very well be on board with cutting emissions and not building coal plants because they may shift over to nuclear. It would not surprise me if they shift over to nuclear.
But as they say they're on board, they're building coal
Well, yes,
plants.
of course. Well, that's what they're doing.
Right.
This is the issue of the transition periods, Jerry, between communism. Well, I'm sorry, between socialism and capitalism, or socialism and communism. So you have those things going on, but that's the thing that gets me is these lessons that we learn, right? When your power goes out, you cannot charge your electric vehicle.
Right.
And if it's weather like today,
and we lost power just recently here at the
this
Rogers at the Blue House. We lost power, and you know what we did? Number one, we could use a generator, a portable that's powered by fossil fuels.
right?
Number two, we didn't need to do that because the power was off for just about, 8 hours or so we were okay. But number two, though, when we had to charge our phone, guess what we did? We went out to the car.
There you go.
Right? I mean, so but here's again, here's the layeredness to this, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about conservation, environmentalism, we're talking about climate change. China is going its own way because it cares about domination and power. It cares about China first. It's okay, China first, right? Well,
Right.
they're Chinese, of course. But however, this administration is acting as if they are purposefully undermining America.
Right.
You know, since Joe Biden took office, we have between 8 and 9 million undocumented illegal aliens. 9 million.
Have you?
I mean, think about that. 9 million.
Have you seen this latest image, Jerry, that's circulating about, if you're an undocumented immigrant, you show up at an airport,
right?
And you don't have an ID. It's your option to get your picture taken.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's madness, but also on undocumented aliens, you have, for instance, in Maine, they are building housing for undocumented, building housing, giving them cash payments, giving them access to $100,000 each for legal advice. Giving them we are pouring welfare and cash and legal aid, housing on these undocumented migrants, and yet there are Americans. There was a special. I watched a news show today. I was shocked to watch it. That how Americans are being crushed by inflation still. The underlying inflation, the core inflation under Biden is still 3.9%. I mean, groceries are up, I think, 30%, energy 27%. It's amazing that we're being crushed by this economy. And at the same time, the Biden administration is literally giving housing and food and cash and medical care and legal care to undocumented invaders. And again, why can't we have an America First policy where we say this is not good for the U.S.? And again, just to close the loop,
please.
It's not just the open crisis, the open border crisis. It's also how we have just given up with China. How the Middle East is a wreck. How there is war in Eastern Europe. This administration, you could not write a movie where there was an insurrection or a coup, where a powerful elite took over the government in order to undermine and fundamentally transform the country.
It's funny you say that, Jerry, because I was toying with that story years ago. I mean, we're talking probably 25 years ago, toying with the story of sort of the elitist cabal working to run things. It's interesting with that because I had a conversation on one of the radio shows I was a guest on yesterday about what's going on with the World Economic Forum and Davos, and Javier Milei's speech especially. You've got who was it who was just warning the folks at Davos about what they're doing, but this idea of Milei and Viktor Orban and, the folks in the Netherlands and the folk, frankly, in France, the march of conservatism or free market and limited government ideals to push back against the elites. I mean, here's the push pull, right, Jerry? We have folks who are understanding what's going on. And this is where you get the Javier Milei election down in Argentina, and you get changes happening in Europe pushing back against the EU. But what the left is counting on, and this gets into the Supreme Court's arguments earlier this week, The left is counting on the inertia of the bureaucracy and the administrative state, and the fact that the administrative state is wrapped up in every aspect of Americans' lives to continue to push this agenda. We had 2 instances in the last 10 days, shocking to me, of executive branch agencies pulling back, regulatory proceedings because of the public outcry. The public is noticing, but the left also knows, and the elites know especially, that we can't notice everything. It's impossible for us to notice everything. So whether it is the EV mandate or and we can't fight everything in court because we don't have the resources. So we can't fight the dishwasher and the washing machine mandates, that all the time here. Anyway, I'm sorry.
To your point, there's a column today I read on giving praise to Wes Moore because he's addressing the housing crisis in the state of Maryland. And I find it very interesting because they're giving him credit because he wants to, again, interfere in the market.
Right.
He wants affordable housing. Never mind affordable housing and how the government enacts affordable housing. Never mind the fact that affordable housing and access to housing are 2 different things. This is the same thing with medicine, right? You want to have Medicare for all or Medicaid for all, which sounds nice in a Bernie Sanders soundbite, but the fact of the matter is, Medicare for all doesn't mean access for all, right? And the same thing with housing. Same thing with housing. The problem is that their solutions cause problems.
Right.
And back to your point. So we're talking about these mandates taking out gas stoves and houses and all the rest of it. So on one hand, Wes Moore is pushing a climate action agenda that will cost the state of Maryland, that now has a structural deficit of about $1 billion a year. Also, we know that these new climate action, when it comes to housing and healthcare, it increases the cost. Right? These new mandates on housing, these taking away fossil fuels in terms of healthcare, only increases the cost. So he's getting praised by the elites for his interference or his intervention on housing, but they don't examine that his other policies, specifically on climate change, is going to drive up the cost of housing and drive up the cost of Medicare, of healthcare. So it's yeah.
Well, in Maryland especially, right, the issue of policies that are window dressing, that don't actually address problems but sound good, that's been going on. I mean, that's been going on since time immemorial, and it's emblematic of the problem of having one party rule in any kind of a system, whether it's a state or whether it's the federal government or what have you. That's certainly an issue. It's interesting because I have been, and you know this, Jerry, because you and I've talked about it. I have been working on trying to write an op-ed, and the op-ed started off as one thing last week, dealing with attacks on religious freedom. And now I want to come back and work on it from this concept of the whole of government. And this gets into what you're talking about here, Jerry, because Wes Moore is doing this. I'm sorry, not just the whole of government side of it, but the reality is that the left no longer cares. Well, maybe they didn't ever care about the cost of regulation or the cost of public policy.
Hold on, Jerry. Amen to that. They don't care.
No, and that's just it. And how do we know this, right? This isn't me spitballing and engaging in hyperbole. The Biden administration just went through an effort. So there's a process by which new rules are supposed to be examined for their costs and benefits. And there's a procedure that was put out, that's been put out for years by the Office of Management and Budget to do this. And it's governed under something called Circular A4. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole completely. The point is that the Biden administration updated Circular A4 back in the spring and into the summertime. A couple of proposals, folks commented on those proposals. And from our perspective, mine, the good folks at CEI, elsewhere, is that the administration in this proposal said that they no longer care about costs. All they care about is benefits. And the problem, of course, is that when you create artificial benefits, you can gin the system to do anything that you want. And
Sure.
this is
But
true whether it's the issue of affordable housing, right? You just make a pronouncement. Well, this is going to solve the problem. The benefit is it creates affordable housing.
listen,
Cost be damned. Go ahead.
again, just to put a real life, real time highlight to what you just said. New York Congressman squad member, Representative Jamal Bowman, remember, infamous for trying to stop a vote by going through the emergency door. By the way, he was never punished for that. Never punished for interfering with government proceedings.
Right.
And he lied about it. But regardless, it's a Democrat. He's a squad member. He's a member of a protected minority class, so therefore we don't hold him accountable. But anyway, he put out this week, he floated this idea. He and 8 others have a bill for reparations, slavery reparations, $14 trillion. And someone in the media had the temerity or the courage, or maybe they weren't thinking, and they asked him, how would you pay for it? His response was, we will spend it into existence.
Right.
In other words, they don't know and they don't care. $14 trillion.
The irony is, Jerry, and you know this, I'm now finally going through and watching The West Wing. And
Yes.
and I'm at the episode where Josh is arguing with a guy who's the nominee for the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and he had endorsed some book on reparations, and the cost that this gentleman says to Josh Lyman, played by Bradley Whitford, is it's going to cost $1.3 trillion. Kid stuff. Listen, if only it would cost $1.3 trillion.
Also, this idea of reparations is so offensive. I don't understand how it is even considered in polite company, because not only has the U.S. government and the American people paid reparations through blood, the Civil War, through blood, the Civil Rights Movement, through Treasury in terms of the Great Society, through education with affirmative action, and the list is on and on. We have already spent multi-trillions of dollars. The problem in our culture, in terms of the wealth racial gap, in terms of the schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline, this is not a money issue. It's not a wealth issue. It's certainly not an issue related to slavery, given that, I mean, the percentage of Americans in terms of first and second generation immigrants, most of us weren't even here during but my point is this, just real quick, I apologize, I'm long-winded today. But the point is that this is offensive, and the problem is it's a cultural problem. It's the breakdown of the family problem. It's a public school failure problem.
Let's get to what you were talking about with what Wes Moore was saying in terms of housing and what the impact of his proposal will actually have on housing. The point in the end is, you can talk about all of these things. We can talk about fairness and rightness of the issue, but from a purely public policy perspective, if you want to empower people to act on their own behalf, and you want to undo the injustices of the past, making people dependent upon government money is not the way to do this.
Well, and actually all evidence shows us it does the opposite.
It's exactly right. And so the point is that what did he say? $14 trillion? $14 trillion in reparations will be like taking everything that LBJ did in the Great Society and the impacts that had, the war on poverty, which became the war on the poor, and it will be like adding nuclear weapons to the mix in the war on the poor. And it will create, again, further create, if the Great Society created a permanent underclass, I don't even know what the next step, I don't know how you can make something a more permanent underclass, but an underclass for all time. It will do the, as you just said, the exact opposite of everything.
Just a couple of add-ons there. Number one, so they're talking about $14 trillion. That's their estimate to repay African Americans who are somehow still impacted by the aftermath of slavery itself. $14 trillion. Well, since 1965. When Lyndon Johnson declared war on poverty, the U.S. government has spent taxpayer monies, $23 trillion, Andrew.
Okay.
So we've already spent 23 trillion on reparations, on trying to right wrongs. And to your point, it had the opposite impact. We've made, look, the African-American family, even under Jim Crow, even in a racist, structurally and institutional racist America, like I understand that there was a time in this country when police were rogue police officers, when institutions, especially in the South, were institutionally racist. I get it. Structural racism existed in this country. It doesn't exist today, by the way, but it did exist. But even then, even during that oppression, the African-American family was better off in terms of their wealth, in terms of property. Now, I'm not excusing, please, if you're listening to this, I am not excusing Jim Crow. What I'm saying is that the Great Society, the war on poverty, has actually done more damage to the African-American family, perhaps we can make this argument, than Jim Crow itself.
Let's explain why. And it comes down to something very simple for me. It's sort of a basic philosophy from which a lot of my beliefs stem from. You know, I'm going to, Jerry, I'm going to monologue for a second here, so stay with me. So, because I was talking about this literally back at CEI yesterday, you know, Fred Smith, we've talked about at length on the show. Fred Smith and I were invited in 2006 to a transpartisan event on energy that was held up in the Colorado Rockies. And it was 8 conservative or libertarian folks, 8 leftists, including Joan Blades from MoveOn.org and Al Gore, among other people, and 8 folks supposedly in the middle. The point is, one of the things we did was we had an exercise in which we talked about our core values. And I said, well, my core value is freedom. And folks were like, well, I don't understand what that means. Is freedom really a core value? I said, yeah, I wake up in the morning and I think about how we can make people more free. This issue of empowerment versus disempowerment. When African Americans were empowered to act on their own behalf, right? And even during, as you said, Jim Crow, but you know, when there were advocates amongst the African American community for self-reliance, for doing for yourself and bettering yourself, that had an impact. It's this issue of self-value, self-worth. But when you go down the road of telling people that they are victims and that they are owed something, and it perpetuates this environment, it makes people subservient to the state. It makes them dependent upon the state. And then when you add into this idea of the nanny state and further working to disempower people, whether it's to disempower people to defend themselves or to disempower people to make choices as to where they live or who they want to hang out with, this is a problem. And that's where we are. We have been working, the elites work overtime to disempower people of all shapes and sizes, right? This is why I come back to the great failure of the Obama administration was not, well, there are lots of failures, but the great failure of the Obama administration was framing issues in which abuses of power, he framed them as racial issues when he should have been framing them. And of course he didn't, because he's an elitist, about the powerful versus the disempowered or the powerless. And that's the problem that we have in America.
Andrew, you are 100% correct. And also, I want to remind our viewers and our listeners that, remember, it was Barack Obama who said that he wants to fundamentally transform America.
Right.
Wrap your head around that comment for a second. Why would a responsible American leader want to transform, not reform, not change, not tweak, not work for the better, but his words, not my words, fundamentally transform America? Why would a responsible American leader say that? Well, because Barack Obama and more broadly, the elites, the progressive elites, they hate America.
Right.
They want dependency. They want to transform the market, the family. Look, it is not an accident that public schools in this country are spending more time. I'm going to exaggerate here to make a point. I'm not sure if it's spending more time, but allow me this exaggeration.
Please.
They're spending more time talking with young people about sexual issues and sexualized topics and how to have sex and who to have sex with. Instead of teaching science, math, instead of teaching reading and writing and great literature and American history, they're not teaching those things. Well, they're why? Because the elites in this country want to fundamentally transform America. Look, I just read a story today about a teacher in Florida, a public school teacher, I guess, was going through the class asking who identifies as what. Oh, I identify as this. I identify as that. And someone said, "Well, I identify as straight." And do you know this teacher had a fit?
Oh my God!
That identifying as straight is inappropriate and offensive. Again, that's wrong by itself. But why the hell is a public school teacher talking to our children about how you identify?
But it's also, I mean, doesn't this get down to, in the end, the normalization of identitarian politics?
Of course.
It gets down into the divisions of who we are as a people, right? So it gets into where you were just talking about this, elites who hate America, right? I'm just going to use the phrase S. I was going to poop. We destroy, we sully the reputation of the founding fathers.
Yes,
right? We poop all over the founding fathers.
Stop saying that word. I can't deal with it. Oh.
We have a big bowel movement, Jerry, a big DN. So but the point is, we denigrate the American founding, the principles upon which America was founded. And so we can't come together and have a common view of who we are as a people. America is not the greatest nation on the face of the earth. America is one among equals, and other nations we're going to support and promote their
but again, let's comment there, because sorry, you finish.
No, let me just make the thread. And so we don't have a common heritage upon which to build upon, and then the left serves to put everybody in their boxes. So if you're you are a queer BIPOC, what is it? BIPOC, a person of color, so you're in this box, and you're in that box, and you're in that box of this class. And then if you're a straight white young male, well, you're the evil person because you identify as a straight white conservative male.
Johns Hopkins University sent out from its DEI office, sent out a notice 2 weeks ago saying that, what does privilege look like?
Right. Yes. Thank you for bringing this
and
up.
It was if you're white, if you're male, if you are heterosexual, if you are Christian, if you own property. Essentially, again, the elites in this country, it's not enough to fundamentally transform America. What they also want to do is they want to find a class or a group to blame and to vilify. And again, our old mentor, Fred Smith, said about business, he said industry, he said, if you make something into a pariah, you can tax it, regulate it, you can destroy it. And so the left has done that with industry, with those the doers who are in the arena making things. But wait a second, they've now done it, they're now doing it not just in terms of industry, they're now doing it based upon ethnicity and race, which is very scary.
But Jerry, I mean, that's the thing that gets me, is yet another a free market limited government leader out there was retweeting today a story about Wall Street being very concerned about Donald Trump's second term, which is insane, by the way. But this free market limited government organization leader was ballyhooing it, saying that, oh, it's right to be concerned about Donald Trump. And I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, I don't understand this. We are in the throes of an economic crisis. And when I say this is not hyperbolic, and this is not just talking about the inflation issue, but it's talking about the breadth of the economy, the falsities when it comes to jobs, but most importantly, a regulatory state where, if we continue on the track that the Biden administration has put us on, will cost us $7 trillion in direct regulatory cost and 19 times that in indirect regulatory costs.
Andrew, and on top of that,
sorry, go ahead.
On top of that, we now pay more interest on the debt than we do for national defense.
Yes.
For all our friends who say on the left, who say, and the libertarian right, who say we spend too much on defense, well, shame on you. We're now spending more on interest on our debt than we do on national defense. I'm telling you, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, America's enemies, are just waiting for us to collapse on ourselves.
Right.
You're right. And this is what bothers me. A free market. I love these think tankers. They're so concerned about the DC. Again, I call it the cocktail circuit, where they're in the company of others. They want to be accepted there, and so their ticket is to really go after Donald Trump. Right. Now, let me say this again. I have to clarify. I am not a fan of Donald Trump, but if it's Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, there is no real choice.
Right. Absolutely.
And what bothers me are these think tankers and these conservatives, again, taking billions of dollars from the donor class in order to do what? In terms,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
But the thing is that I don't hear them. I don't hear Jonah Goldberg. I don't hear Chris Christie just talked about it these last couple of days, that he is seriously considering voting for Joe Biden. How can Chris Christie run for the GOP nomination and then say he's going to, where's the criticism of Joe Biden?
Let's take it from a basic substantive policy perspective. Let's talk about think tank leaders that are not supposed to be political and are not supposed to be partisan, but they're supposed to focus on the issues. How can you, with a straight face, run an organization that is fighting the fight on things like regulation and raising great alarm about, what the Biden administration is doing in terms of regulatory accountability and transparency, in terms of the administrative state, in terms of putting people in power who are expanding the administrative state and abusing their powers in terms of the administrative state, that are pushing cases before the Supreme Court on those issues, and then with a straight face say Donald Trump would be worse than Joe Biden? That does not make any sense. If we are in a crisis here, and I believe we are, right? The administrative state cannot get bigger. It's going to, but it should not. 4 more years of Joe Biden is not what we need.
Andrew, Beth Moore, who is a Christian leader. She is a author. She has a great following of millions of mostly a female audience, Christian women. Came out the other day on Twitter and wrote something. Synopsis is, Trump is such a bad character. He's of such low moral character. How can any Christian support him? And she has done this before. In 2020, 2016, she was very anti-Trump from a Christian perspective. I understand how a Christian might say, low character, I'm going to sit it out. I'm going to vote for Congress, vote for Senate, vote for mayor. I just can't. I can't because of in my heart of hearts, I can't vote for such a man. Now, never mind the problem with that, because there's lots of bad men and bad women who run in politics. But here's the thing. I searched. Beth Moore has never said anything about Joe Biden and Democrats. Has never commented on their celebration of abortion. She has not commented on how Democrats and progressives are promoting transgenderism and chemical castration and mutilation of young people. She has not commented on the humanitarian crisis at our border. She hasn't commented on the chaos in the Middle East. Or my point is that, and this is true for the Never Trumpers and for the think tankers, they will criticize Trump with a kind of moral superiority, but they will not criticize Joe Biden, and it makes no sense to me. And let's say one last thing, please. And that is I understand this, but at the end of the day, we have to look at who is going to do less harm almost.
Jerry, it gets back to the op-ed that you and I wrote back in October of 2016, in which we engaged in this mental gymnastics about what to do in terms of the election. And the conclusion in the end was, yes, when you're voting for the lesser of two evils, you're still voting for evil. But on the other hand, if by not voting for the lesser of two evils, you aid and abet the election of the greater evil, then it behooves you. You have a moral obligation to vote for that lesser of two evils. That's the bottom line.
Should we rethink history? And was it wrong for FDR to align himself with Stalin to defeat Nazism?
Right. That's exactly it. That's a great point to make. It's the most well-intentioned policies. Against very real reality.
Here's part of the problem. You and I don't have any difficulty just speaking our mind.
Yes.
Because we know our mind.
Yeah.
Show me a man or a woman who knows his or herself, their own mind, and I show you someone who has moral courage.
Yeah.
Intellectual credibility and honesty. Here's the problem with those who criticize Trump but are silent on progressives and silent on Joe Biden and the rest of it. It's like the abortion issue. Many conservatives don't want to talk about abortion. When they do talk about abortion, they make the issue worse for conservatives.
Sure.
They haven't learned how to talk about this issue. I can talk about it to anyone and I'll debate anyone on it because I'm right and I have the science and I have the morals and I have the law. I have everything on my side. I'll have that. I'll argue this with anyone and I'll win the argument.
By the way, today we're recording it. Today's March for Life Day.
I know it is March for Life Day, but Trump is almost like the abortion of presidential politics. There are people who understand, like with abortion, we know it's wrong, but I just want it to go away. I just want it to go away. I don't want to talk about it. It just is going to hurt us. Well, the same thing with Trump. I know he's better than Biden, but I don't know how to talk about him at a dinner party or when I'm with my colleagues at a black tie dinner. I just want him to go away. And you know what? And I get points. For saying that he's bad and we can't elect him. Just like the libertarians love to be pro-choice because they think it gets some points with the right and with the left rather. And the bottom line is let's stop doing this. The left knows its own mind and they speak their truth, which is not the truth, but they speak it loudly and they put their actions where their minds are. We still don't do that.
We have to be be better at it. Jerry, listen, I know you wanted to do a tight
yes, indeed. It is a snowy. I was out shoveling earlier today, and it looks like we're going to have a little family reunion here at the Rogers.
Fun.
The girls are coming out. Everyone's home from school. I think the kids all want to go have a winter holiday sledding and such things. So.
Did you go ice skating? Where we were? Why were? Oh yeah,
we did not go because of the snow. We didn't go into ice skate.
So because I was up in Rockville on Monday and drove past someplace where there was ice skating. So you on Sunday?
Sunday, it's Jerry, WBAL. I tell you what, in all humility, go and listen to my last two podcasts over at WBAL podcast. It really is the best radio that's on right now.
And you got to check out this week's Lunch Hour with Federal Newswire. I sit down with Kevin Cirilli. It's a great interview.
Yes.
Fascinating stuff talking about this. All kinds of good things happening there. Jerry, what do you want folks to do?
Oh, find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm. God bless you.
Happy New Year, everybody. Please let your friends and family members know about the Lunch Hour. Subscribe. Leave us the Lunch Hour. Let your friends and family members know about Andrew and Jerry Save the World. Leave a review, subscribe, tweet us out on social media. Have a great week, everybody. Have fun, and please stay safe.